To me, it's amazing what time can do for a game. Sometimes what we once thought was a great game at the time, as technology advances or the techniques and mechanics evolve, it becomes clear just how dated that title might be. Whereas other games that might not have been well received due to it being drastically different in style, which turned people off at the time, but would later come to appreciate it more, long after the dust had settled. It's a weird concept since the games themselves haven't changed, just people's perspectives and views. Resident Evil 4 is one of those titles where a good chunk of its fans are starting to not actually view it as the masterpiece it was made out to be in 2005. Back then, it was basically a gaming phenomenon. It not only rejuvenated the series that was on its last life, like straight up if Resident Evil 4 didn't do well, then the series would have been retired due to not selling that well for the past couple entries. Even the much beloved Resident Evil remake wasn't a financial success, so RE4 kept this series afloat. But not only that, the gameplay change would go on to become one of the most important gameplay styles introduced in all of gaming. It completely changed how we play third-person shooters or even just third-person games in general, that even to this day developers are still using as the blueprint for the basic setup. It's that important of a game for the video game industry. But for a game that has such a legacy behind it, why is it that some of the fans of the Resident Evil series might not have a high opinion of it? In fact, some fans flat out despise this game's existence, all because they feel it was the start of Resident Evil's downfall into action. And sure, it definitely was a drastic change that barely resembled what the classics was known for, but to make it out like it's a bad game? I'm sorry, but no. Different doesn't automatically mean bad, it's just a different take. And like it or not, this series needed that kind of different, or else 4 would have been it, and we wouldn't even have games like 5 or 6 to bitch and moan about. Now keep in mind, I'm not saying it's wrong to dislike this game if it's just not for you, and you only prefer the older style, but I can never agree with the notion that something is bad simply because it's not doing what I expect it to. Because Resident Evil 4 does a lot of things right. First off, the new control scheme. No longer was the series being held back by limitations and being forced to do tank controls and the camera angles. Now you have a much better sense of control over Leon. Whether it's walking or running or aiming and shooting, you feel like you're the one actually making the shots now. Now sure, it still is technically tank controls, but to have that kind of freedom, even though it's kind of basic by today's standards, was a great addition. I also think 4 was the only one that really nailed the perfect balance between new and old. 5 and 6 would just go full on action. In the Revelation series, while I did greatly enjoy both games and do hope we do see a third one, I can't deny that both of those titles felt like they were just trying to recapture this game's feel. And to Revelation 2's credit, it did a pretty good job, but Resident Evil 4 definitely has its own distinct feel that makes it feel separate from the rest of the series. That probably has a lot to do with the game's story though. Resident Evil 4 basically jumps way ahead a couple years after the intro, revealing that Umbrella had already been taken down. So now we have a new villainous group with the Ganados and the Los Illuminados, the very stereotype of a pagan cult. No longer are there zombies, but a new threat with a parasite called the Las Plagas, which can take control of a person's body and mind, turning this village into a hive mind all at the mercy of Osmond Sadler and his lackeys Raymond Salazar and Bitores Mendez. So with the introduction of this new parasite, in a way we have a new controlled outbreak. And I know for a while people had gotten sick of the Ganado enemy archetype since Capcom would continuously use it for a while, not to mention on top of zombies just being more intimidating in general. But at the time, I'd argue this was probably a much needed switch up. Up until 4, zombies were the main enemy for 6 main entries if you count the remake as its own game. By then, zombies weren't threatening anymore. People dealt with them for so long they had just become glorified Goombas, whereas now players had to deal with a whole new enemy type. No longer were you fighting undead creatures. These people were very much alive, and very aggressive that worked together and used weapons. And now you could freely aim, potentially missing shots on these faster and smarter enemies. Some would wield chainsaws that could decapitate you, others wielded dynamite and crossbows. Hell, you would later learn that some of these bastards would mutate into stronger variants after taking some damage. This was a whole new ballgame, and to me a very welcome addition that managed to make things a lot more tense for a while the first time you played. But you still had your random creatures here and there too, like the Plaga dogs, hands down the scariest version of the dog enemy to date. That growl, holy fuck. Then you have those fly-like enemies that can melt your face, the El Gigante being a major what the hell moment. And of course what is easily the most creepiest and demented enemy in the entire series, the Regenerators and their cousins the Iron Maidens. The sound they make alone is more than enough to put players on edge. Then having to find out that they regenerate limbs just as quickly as you shoot them off. I don't care how much you may think Resident Evil 4 isn't a real Resident Evil game, these demons alone prove otherwise. Now I think one of the best additions they made to this game was the ability to earn money and treasures, and spend it on weapons, items, and upgrades through what is easily the most iconic part about this game, being the merchant. The character himself, he's just so out of place between everything else going on. He's not aligned with anyone, and is just a third party in this entire adventure. Yet you know he's a carrier of the Las Plagas due to his eyes growing red at night. It's so bizarre and I'd kill to know more about him, or at least see him playable in a mercenaries type mode or something. But I guess the mystery is what's so appealing to him. Well, that and his iconic dialogue. It shouldn't work for a game like this, but my god, I couldn't picture this game without him. But he's also linked with the shop for better or worse, and this shop is easily, in my opinion, one of the biggest additions to gameplay besides the overhaul in perspective and controls. Now that there's a currency, it means there's a character growth and progression now. You can buy new and better guns, upgrade the ones you have through extra parts and permanent increases to the gun specs. You can buy more inventory space to hold more stuff so that you still have that sense of item management, but without making it feel obnoxious later on. The sense of growth adds so much to the experience in my opinion. It makes playing through games like this much more worth it because it feels like you're growing in more than just skill. It's a good feeling and there's no other way to describe it. So yeah, as you can see, I really appreciate this game and what it was able to do. Ironically though, for a time I used to not like it as much since when I was younger. I just felt it was a poor man's Resident Evil 5, but dumbass young me, 5 owes a hell of a lot to 4. And once I realized that, I enjoyed it so much more and grew such a deep appreciation for what this game was able to do back in 2005. No matter how you look at it, it's a great game. In my opinion, it's been able to stand the test of time. Could one argue that it just doesn't feel like a real Resident Evil game? Yeah. There's plenty of arguments to say that it doesn't feel like one. In terms of story, it's very much in its own little bubble. You could take it out of the equation, nothing major would be lost because of it. There's no Umbrella, none of the major tropes the series was known for is in this game. It didn't really connect to what happened after Code Veronica, and even by Resident Evil standards, it was very hokey and B-rated, with Leon and the Merchant just feeling way over the top at points. So mix that in with its major game mechanic changes, one could make the case that it doesn't feel like a proper Resident Evil. And I won't argue that if you feel that way, but nobody's ever going to tell me that Resident Evil 4 is bad because of it. If the day ever comes and I review something badly simply because it's doing something different than what's considered norm for the series, well, I'll have to fucking slap myself.